Tom Slater's here with us. The big story of the day is not what you think it is, right? It's not the budget, because we've done that, and we'll mention it in and out of the show. But the big story of the day is Donald Trump and this incredible video that he's done. Here he is getting off the Trump plane, battle bus, whatever you want to call it, battle plane, wearing a high-vis jacket because he's about to jump into a garbage truck. You might remember just the other day, Joe Biden managed to screw up Kamala Harris's campaign by referring to Trump supporters as garbage, right? This was after a joke that was made about Puerto Rico at the Trump convention in New York City. And here he is jumping into a garbage truck, as they call it there, and driving it around. We're going to play you later some of the talk that he was doing while he was doing it, some of the funny stuff that he's done. He's basically turned into a comedian, Tom, and he's great at it, by the way.
No, absolutely.
And this has broken the internet.
It's this, the McDonald's thing, the speech he gave where he was making all kinds of jokes about Tim Walz and Democrats and gender ideology. It's a reminder of the things that he's actually uniquely good at, which is partly appearing kind of not like a career politician, being funny, and also I think it works.
Entertaining people.
And because that's what he's done for most of his career. You forget this sometimes, but it's also the fact that I think, specifically with that section of the electorate, who probably are a little bit concerned about some of the rougher edges of him, who are a little bit concerned about what happened towards the end of his presidency with January 6th and so on. It undercuts that when you've just got someone being entertaining and quite light-hearted and not going into that slightly dark gear.
I mean, Elon Musk has called it top trolling, you know, and it's sort of 32 million views on his Twitter. The Trump video's got 38 million. I mean, it's just incredible. And what they're basically saying is that to every blue-collar worker in America, look, here he is driving a truck. So they're all going to vote for him, aren't they?
And especially after those garbage comments where you had Joe Biden saying...
Which were really stupid.
I know, and also the desperate way they tried to walk them back. He's saying the only garbage I see is the Trump supporters. And then they said, no, if you move the apostrophe, he was talking about that one Trump supporter who was giving that speech. And you think this is embarrassing.
And then he was trying to say it was all about Trump and it was he that was garbage. It was, no, you can't do that.
Everyone saw what happened. And also, they can't help but do this. We saw it with the basket of deplorables comment from Hillary Clinton. We saw it more recently with Barack Obama going out and accusing black American men of being misogynists for not wanting to vote for Kamala Harris. Whenever something starts to go wrong, they start having a go at the electorate rather than having a look in the mirror. They keep doing it.
It's not a good look, is it? And this is the thing, you know, while they're comparing him to Adolf Hitler, he's serving chips at McDonald's. And, you know, as people have said, you know, Hitler didn't really do that. He was a bit more dangerous, I think you'll find. Let's talk about many things, including Lindsay Hoyle. Yesterday, this is what happened before Prime Minister's questions, I believe, because Richard Tyson was on with us yesterday. He had a question that he wanted to put to Keir Starmer about Southport and about the allegations of a cover-up. Lindsay Hoyle basically snuffed it all out. Have a look.
I wish to remind the House that the following horrendous, terrible incident in Southport on the 29th of July, a suspect is awaiting trial, having been charged with multiple offences. That means the House Sub Judice resolution is engaged and references should not be made to the case. I know that all honourable members wish to see justice done in this case. It is therefore of paramount importance that nothing is said in this House which could potentially prejudice a proper trial or lead to it being abandoned.
I mean, that's so ridiculous to me. You know, we've worked in this business a long time. We understand contempt of court. We did this story yesterday. We understand that you don't want to prejudice a trial, but by talking about a case, you're not prejudicing a trial. And by asking questions of the Prime Minister about what he knew, when he knew it, whether information was suppressed, is not prejudicing a trial.
Especially how broad the definition there was about referencing
so
the
basically you can't talk about it at all.
Which is ridiculous because, as you say, it's obvious that no one, whether in the House of Commons or outside, should want to prejudice this trial. Justice should be done. There is also the presumption of innocence, and that needs to be maintained. And the last thing anyone wants is for this trial to collapse because of too much
and all of which is understood, and all of which is
that's not really what's going on here.
But that's not what's going on, because what's going on with Lindsay Hoyle is he's saying you don't want to talk about it at all. I.e., I mean, you know, because the government, I think, were at pains to point out yesterday to the BBC that Keir Starmer and the Home Office and the Home Secretary found out about the charges within the last few weeks. Now, that's not what the question was, because the question is, when did you know about the possible links to terrorism? because not to do with anything to do with the charges, but to do with what you knew and when you knew it. And that's the question that everybody wants answered.
Exactly, that's all anyone is asking, is what do you know and when? Was there any element of trying to manage this situation? Was there any element of trying to keep this under wraps? That's the questions that people are wanting to ask. It's not about the guilt or otherwise. No, it's not about necessarily...
It's not about the circumstances of how they found it, what they found, you know. It's
and what kind of precedence does this set as well if it was, you know, some kind of other horrendous, God forbid, attack takes place, where it's wrong to ask questions of the government about how the police might have responded, how...
But also this is the overarching worry that many people had at the time, that there's a gap of information. In fact, this morning in the Telegraph, let me find it, because there's a report has come out in which basically the government has been criticised. Ministers, prosecutors and police should have been more open about the background of the suspect in the Southport killings, according to terror watchdog Jonathan Hall, who's the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. He said it left an 8-hour information gap which saw false claims spread on social media. So, you know, they're already being told they got it wrong, and yet we're being told by Lindsay Hoyle, oh, you can't mention that.
At the very least, we need to...
Presumably you can't read that out in Parliament, then?
Yeah, well, at the very least, we need to be able to discuss these things openly. Yeah. And I think the caginess around this, and also when it is
ridiculous.
A Speaker of the House of Commons, but one who does ultimately come from the Labour Party making these interventions, it does raise questions about... you know, is this just providing political cover for Keir Starmer, which is again something that should raise...
Well, I can imagine that it was Keir Starmer or somebody representing him who went to the Speaker's office and said, would you mind saying this, so that nobody asked any awkward questions. And that doesn't sound like democracy to me.
At the very least, even if this is just where we've ended up at, because of the Speaker being overly cautious about not wanting to prejudice this trial, it still creates a situation where a line of questioning to Keir Starmer that should be pursued isn't now going to be pursued. And also, look where being overly cautious has got us. It got us down the road of rape gangs, Pakistani rape gangs that nobody talked about, because we were cautious because we didn't want to upset the local community. It's got us into all sorts of trouble with other people who have turned out to be terrorist killers, like the guy that killed David Amos, the MP, who was part of the Prevent programme, but who somehow slipped through the net, despite the fact that he told them he was thinking of joining ISIS. You know, but we can't talk about it, so therefore we'll just pretend it's not happening. And Liz Truss was here yesterday, and she said it very clearly. She said the British public are not going to buy the fact that we have got the biggest danger in this country from the far right, not from Islamic terrorism. And they're not buying it. The David Amos case is a good reminder, because I think it was within, I can't remember exactly, but it was within hours to days that we found out that the police were at least investigating a potential Islamist motivation. They hadn't brought charges, they hadn't got anything definitive, but they still let that information be out there so that people could have a clearer picture of what had taken place. Compare that to the months that we've had here, it does suggest that it at least raises the question as to why that gap is so big. It also reminds there may well be a plausible explanation for it, but I would like to hear it. But we are grown-ups and we can have the conversation. You know, we don't have to be told like children, oh, don't go there, don't talk about that, don't mention it, because it might be a bit difficult and you might screw up the court case. More importantly, up in Scotland, they've still gone mad. The Scottish Book Trust, which organises more than 20,000 classes a year for babies, toddlers and preschoolers, has excised references to alcohol and violence from nursery rhymes and has made some songs gender neutral. So I'm afraid it's bad news for What Should We Do with the Drunken Sailor. You can't say that anymore. So you know what they've turned it into? What Should We Do with a Grumpy Pirate? Oh, God. I mean, the trouble with these people, right, is that, so you've replaced the drunken sailor, who's probably relatively harmless and will pass out in the corner, with a grumpy pirate who may have a cutlass and could slit your throat if he doesn't like the look of you. No, exactly. So how is that any way safeguarding children? Is that any better? I mean, it's like those, you always used to get these stories and you would think, oh, that can't be true. And yet now they're kind of 10 a penny. Yeah. How have these people got so much time on their hands? I know. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And of course, because it is Halloween, we're going to be asking you later on through the show what it's going to be like, because one of the things that we hear an awful lot about now is the Halloween kind of, you know, extravaganza, as it's now become known. I've started noticing, and for the first time this year, I don't know whether you have, houses bedecked with Halloween stuff, like the Christmas tree lights, you know, pumpkins, you know, cobwebs, you know, witches on brooms. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. We never used to do this, did we? No, and that's the thing. I was still kind of just about the generation where this felt like a kind of strange US import that we didn't really engage with that much, maybe a little bit around the edges. People would have Halloween parties, maybe, and you'd go dressed up as something. Kids might knock around a bit. Yeah, but now it's like people cower behind their doors not wanting to open them because trick-or-treaters turn up, and if you don't give them anything, they pelt your house with eggs. No, absolutely. But it does feel like it's a it's just here to stay now.
Yeah.
One of the...
It is extraordinary, so we'll be talking about that quite a lot later on. But Bonfire Night, of course, is coming up for a lot of people this weekend, but not for the people apparently in Labour-run Erewash Borough Council, because apparently they've decided that Bonfire Night on Saturday is fine to go ahead, but they can't have a bonfire because it's too smoky. It's bad for the environment.
When did they discover this? When someone let them know that if you set fire to the wood, it might get a bit smoky.
Yeah, I mean, where I am down in Sussex, there's a big bonfire night, and it does get smoky, and sometimes your eyes get a bit watery if you stand a bit too close to the fire.
Been doing it for quite a long time. You'd think they'd have realised this by now.
I mean, in the place I go, they pull sort of burning trucks along the road, you know, which is great. It's all very medieval, and they've got torches and all this kind of thing, you know. And you wouldn't be at all surprised to see, you know, a couple of Normans coming around the corner. But, you know, that's the point of doing it, isn't it? I mean, I've been saying of late, because of the fireworks noise that bothers animals and that, you could have fireworks that don't make any noise. I wouldn't mind that. But you can't do away with the bonfire.
No, exactly, especially because it's bonfire night.
It is bonfire night. Although they can call it Guy Fawkes night, I suppose.
Of course.
And Sun headline, Fire Fork Off, which is not bad.
Not bad
finally, in case you thought we were encaptured by the unions and stuck in the 1970s, apparently Northern Rail has to use fax machines because the union says they have to use fax machines.
It's fascinating. The number of you know, quite essential services in the UK that are reliant on fax machines.
The NHS is still using them.
It's incredible.
So it's probably a union organised thing. Unbelievable stuff.
Really pro-fax.
Tom, very good to see you. Tom Slater there with the look at all the big stories in the papers.